So he's using this, but he wasn't.
And were you the technical person tonight?
He shut off his browser. I don't know why he did.
Chat.
But
Chat.
it's better to be.
It's gonna play cage.
No.
Oh,
sorry.
What are you gonna do?
They're over. Is it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. There. So the people virtually will be able to see that. They won't be able to see that. Okay. But when you get the
I think you will. I think you will see them. When you start to show, it'll show up on my computer
Oh,
because
really?
I'm in the meeting.
Oh, okay, cool. So
It worked when you just started sharing your screen. It automatically popped up on mine. So you shouldn't have to change anything.
I'll see. Cool. Perfect. Okay. The dog members.
Music so that's to search. She told me to talk for 30 minutes. Yeah. I had one that's like an hour long. That's incorporated the guide. Daughter. Yeah, I like just it's presented with other Photoshop, but thanks for recording. They make it through it. Right. Black.
I suspect we'll be yeah, we're good. Thanks everybody for coming to our March chapter meeting. I'm Marcus Lumi, the St. Louis chapter president. I'm glad you're all here with us tonight and virtually. We have a great program. This is a result of some of the work sessions we've had with Karen's leadership to bring some of our committees together to help on this chapter meetings and the group events. So this is an event hosted by the AIA committee. And we'll have a discussion and a case study with Amy Gilbertson at the AIA, which I like to say, on adopting the just label for the program from the International Living Future Institute. So thanks for Amy and thanks to J.E.D.I for tonight's program. Also want to thank David Charles for being our host tonight. I know you didn't do it by yourself. Karen Taylor-Liggins, the executive director, and Patrick Tetley are also super big and helpful. Patrick's our director of communication. We couldn't be here tonight, but I do encourage you to come back another time. You take use of the resource center here, and on the other side of the wall, visit the bookstore and maybe buy yourself some gifts for clients. One item I wanted to mention, if you can pull the slide up for the AIA recently announced a new campaign called Stop the Clock. For anybody that's been through the EXP or the IDP program, you know there's a 5-year rolling clock. As a way to reduce that hurdle, that threshold for architectural licensing candidates, they're campaigning to end that program. And they've got some support behind them with NCARB and others. So I would like you to just double check that on the next missive. There'll be an article in there, a link, read up on it and show that some support. I think it fits well with our topic tonight on finding ways in our own profession to make sure we are open and accessible to everybody. We have a special event coming up at the end of the month. The president of AIA National, Emily Grandstaff Rice, is going to be in St. Louis at an event for our chapter. So I want to encourage you all to attend that Friday, March 31st. There'll be more details in this week's missive. And if you don't know Emily, she's from the area. I believe she's a scholarship recipient from the Scholarship Trust, which we manage as AIA St. Louis. And she's been a huge supporter of ours coming in and speaking to our membership. So come out for that. I would also like you to encourage you to bring a friend, come with another coworker or a colleague. My own journey at the AIA started in Minneapolis with an architect named Alan Lucan. She grabbed me. I was actually in an owner's rep position. I hired her as an architect through the job that I had at the time. She invited me to an AIA event, and I've been participating ever since. So take a second, look at folks in your office, grab somebody, and invite them to the meeting, particularly when Emily's in town. It'd be great to have a good showing. Our sponsor tonight, Carla Hannigan, I should have asked you your last name, from Ludovici. Huge supporter of both our chapter events and the Resource Center. So I appreciate everything you've done to support us. And if you would like to say a few words, you can come up.
Good evening, everyone, virtually and right in front of me. Thank you for spending the time to come out tonight. First of all, Ludovici is a 134-year-old manufacturer of terracotta products and cladding. We are a proud member of AIA St. Louis Resource Center and have been so now since its conception in 2019. It is wonderful to be here in St. Louis. I reside here in St. Louis, and so I've had the opportunity to present to various architectural firms and design firms here in St. Louis because I also reside here with my family. Some of the notable projects that we have in the St. Louis market is the Basilica, Principia College, Wash U, amongst others, including residential. So if you are interested in our products, I believe it was put into the chat. Our website is ludovici.com. And again, we specialize in terracotta wall cladding as well as terracotta roof systems. And thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you. We definitely appreciate your sponsorship and continued support of our events. So now I need to turn it over to somebody who's online, Nick Rauscher with M&H Architects. He is a member of our J.E.D.I committee, and he's going to introduce Amy.
Thank you, Marcus. Good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight to our event. Again, we want to make sure we thank Ludovici for sponsoring us, and we want to thank David, Patrick, and Karen for all their help in putting this together. My name is Nick Rauscher. I'm a member of our J.E.D.I committee, the AIA St. Louis Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, also known as J.E.D.I or J.E.D.I. Committee provides programming, training, volunteer, and community engagement opportunities to increase diversity, create equity, and encourage inclusivity in our profession, chapter, and practices. In our community and region, we take a stand in support of social justice and equity. Since the committee was started a couple years ago, we've organized workshops, surveys, roundtables, and other discussions around various aspects of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This year, we're excited to keep collaborating with our committees within our AIA chapter, also with our industry partners and St. Louis area organizations. Last month, we co-hosted a discussion on employee resource groups and equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts within firms with the St. Louis NOMA chapter and IIDA's Community Impact Committee. In coming months, we'll be organizing community spotlights, casual events, and panel discussions on topics like neurodiversity and Latinas in architecture. And now it'd be my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. Amy Gilbertson is a member of the AIA College of Fellows. As principal at Trivers, Amy has led the in-house EDI committee in efforts to obtain the firm's first JUST label in 2019 and its renewal in 2021. Since becoming a firm owner in 2015, Amy has worked to make significant improvements to Trivers' architectural practice, resulting in improved retention and engagement, seeking to elevate diversity in our profession through mentorship, education, and advocacy. Amy is a member of University of Michigan's Taubman College Alumni Council. She serves on the Advisory Council for Women in Design and Construction and is former professional practice instructor at Washington University. In design practice, Amy has spent the last 20 years focusing on historic and civic projects throughout the country. With a passion for revitalization, she leverages preservation expertise to create authentic yet modern design interventions for historic structures. Her current work as historic architect includes the Moss Federal Building in Salt Lake City, the Old Courthouse in St. Louis, and the Bean Federal Center in Indianapolis. And with that, I will virtually turn things over to Amy in the room with you.
Thanks, Nick. Let's see. 2. Working? Everyone see it? We're good? Okay. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I think I should have about 30 minutes of presentation to go through so that we have plenty of time for questions, discussion, wherever you all want to take this. So we're going to start, if it works. Oh, did I have to log into that to make it work? We forget to do that. Should I do that now? Or is it too late?
You could do that.
Okay, hold on, hold please. We were here so long setting up. Should I pause my sharing? Hang on 1 second. We have an interactive thing for everyone to do here, so let me see if I can get it going. We have, yeah, otherwise we're gonna raise our hands, but I'm gonna try this. And that's for so long to make it work. Should I just not do it? What do you think? To do here? No, I'm not sharing. Okay. Oh, well, so much for that technology. We were going to have an interactive thing, but now we will not. We will just answer. That's okay. I think we'll be all right. Okay. So back to screen sharing. Share. Okay. Can everyone see it again? Do you remember what the questions were?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe you can help me and say the questions. Oh, I think the first one was about what, so we had like an interactive thing where you could answer, but the first question was about how involved your own firms were in terms of discussing equity and social justice in your firms. So one was like, we never talk about it. One was we're starting to talk about it. And one is we're on it and really engaged. So how many people never talk about it? Couple. How many people are on the other end, very engaged, all in? Okay, more, that's great. Okay, anybody in the middle? Nobody in the middle, okay. Well, so when we start talking about equity in architecture and increasing diversity and inclusion, there are no shortage of ideas and advice. I'm personally a fan of Harvard Business Review. I love TED Talks. I like to read the New York Times. And every week you can get a lot of different articles coming at you through those resources. Also, conferences are really starting to focus on this too. Obviously, the Women in Design and Construction Conference talks about it quite a bit. But I was pleasantly surprised this year at the AIA conference. It was front and center in a lot of the conversations, all of the keynotes. And I was able to even do a course, different version of this presentation at the AIA conference as well. And if you like to read, there are thousands of resources out there offering advice. So it's really difficult to get hit with all of this information and to try to understand where to start because there's so many things you can do, but we wanted to understand which strategies would have the most impact for our firm. So we wanted to really develop a strategic approach to improving equity and inclusion at Trivers, which meant understanding our own firm. And we want to share that with other people. So how can what we've learned through our process help you all form strategies for increasing diversity and inclusion and equity at your own firms. Okay, so we're going to go over the JUST label, like an overview. This question also not populating, but I was curious if anybody's heard of it before. How many of you have heard of the JUST label? Okay, only one. Okay, well then the middle question doesn't really matter, which was like, I've heard of it, but I'm not sure what it is. And I'm sure no one else in the room, correct me if I'm wrong, no one else is working at a firm that has the JUST label. Okay. So I will start with the basics. It's commonly, oh, that's right, Frank's here. So it's not just open to architecture firms. The JUST label is available to all organizations. So it's actually something that I talk to clients about, or, you know, kind of, I just talked to someone about it in a completely different field that I met while I was on vacation. It's a tool that any organization can use. And it exists for the purpose of optimizing policies to improve social equity and enhance employee engagement. It is through the International Living Future Institute, which is why architects are more aware of it than the rest of the world at this point, because architects follow International Living Future Institute and the net zero program that they have. So we just happen to be more in the know. But really it's a self-awareness and transparency tool. It is about understanding where you are as a firm, where your strengths and weaknesses are, and being transparent about it. So sometimes I've had, especially leadership in firms, ask me, like, how can you share this stuff, not only in your own firm, but with the general public and with people at other firms as well. So one of the things that's good to keep in mind is if you're uncomfortable with being transparent as a firm leader, then asking yourself why. And also ask yourself if what you think you're hiding is really actually hidden. Because let's say we don't have a lot of women at our firm. If we're not talking about it, it's not like people don't notice. Like it's pretty obvious. So the JUST label goes deeper than that. But again, it's not about necessarily like being judgmental or anything like that. It's just about understanding where you are, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know how to improve. So these are some stats about the JUST label. So I checked this morning, there are 170 total JUST organizations. So this past summer, when we talked about it at the AIA conference, there were 168. So only a couple more since then. The rest of these numbers I didn't check today, but as of the time of the conference last summer, there were 87 JUST label architecture firms in the country out of over 67,000 architecture firms in the country. So that number probably includes a whole lot of sole practitioners. So we didn't dive that deeply into it, but still at this rate, that's 0.13 participation. So we have we can only go up from there. But there were also 16 states that don't even have a single JUST organization in them. And in Missouri, I believe we're one of only 2 right now. The other one is in Kansas City. So I think we're the only one in St. Louis. We don't want to stay that way, so that's why I'm here tonight. Okay, so to break down the label a little bit, there are 6 different categories in the label: diversity, inclusion, equity, employee health, employee benefits, stewardship, and purchasing and supply chain. So diversity and inclusion and equity overlap pretty well with the AIA guides for equitable practice, but the rest are supplemental and kind of outside of that conversation. So I'm going to walk through each of these categories and just share with you a strength and a challenge that we have at Trivers so that you can understand a little bit better about what's in each of these sections. Before I do that, we did get our first label, as Nick mentioned, in 2019. So that was under the JUST 1.0 label. To their credit, the organization got some lessons learned from the organizations that they were onboarding. So they changed it, and there's now a 2.0 label. So that made it a little difficult when we did our renewal, and it also made it pretty difficult to track our growth or to track if we had actually fallen off in any categories, because even the scoring changed from like a 3-point system to a 4-point system. They changed the categories, you can see here. But I just checked and they're still under 2.0. So I hope by the time we start renewing this fall, we'll be operating with the same criteria, which will make our lives a lot easier. Okay, so we're going to go through the 2.0 label here, and I'm sharing our scores. This is also posted on our website, so it's there for anybody to see. So the first one is diversity and inclusion. So the categories or the subheadings within this category are gender diversity, ethnic diversity, inclusion, and engagement. So you can see pretty quickly that our gender diversity and our equity, we're doing really well on those. And a challenge for us is our ethnic diversity and our inclusion. So with women in leadership, or with gender, diversity being one of our strengths, this is really cool for me to see because, sorry. So when I joined Trivers, and just for context of the whole presentation, I was at Trivers as an intern right after I graduated school. I was there for about 5 years. I left for about 8 years and then came back, and now I'm an owner. So I have a little bit broader perspective on the growth and how things have changed from 20 years ago until now. But when I started there in 2001, I think there were about 6 women in architecture at the firm. So now it's amazing that we've got 50% of our team is female. And I know that's easier for us to achieve because we also have women in leadership. So then that leads to one of the challenges, which is our ethnic diversity and inclusion. So the way the JEST label calculates it is based off of your regional percentage. So let's say, for example, that St. Louis is 50% minority. In order for us to achieve a level 4 on the ethnic diversity, we would have to have 80% of the regional percentage. So we'd have to be 40% minority. So even though we've had a lot of growth, we were about 5% probably in 2015, and now we're at 20%. So we've had a lot of growth, but we also, until very recently, had no ethnic diversity in our leadership team. So with our associates and our principals. So again, we're not going to hide it by not talking about it. It's true. And so it's an area that we identified that we wanted to make improvements in. So those are things that we're working on. The next category is equity. So here again, we're showing on the screen here, we've gotten the EP Friendly Firm Award every year except the 1 year they didn't do it. They didn't have one in 2021. This year, we're really proud that we got the Outstanding EP Friendly Firm. I think we were one of 3 maybe in the Central States region, but not very many. So we're really proud of that. We score really well on the full-time employment and the pay scale equity, but living wage is on here one of our challenges. So actually going through the JEST label certification, I didn't even know that the MIT living wage calculator was a thing. I'd never heard of it before. It's very simple to use, and we realized actually even for our summer interns, we weren't too far off, but we weren't meeting the MIT living wage calculator. So that was an easy thing to do, to change our hourly rate and make sure that we were meeting that. But if you want to get to a level 4 score on the living wage, you need to use the MIT living wage calculator and pay a minimum rate for someone in a family of 2 adults and 3 children. So I just calculated it today, and that would be $33.70. So that would be for anyone. So some firms that are much larger, where they may have even like maintenance staff on board or your summer interns or something like that, Sometimes that's more difficult, but that's what the level 4 is. And we're not there yet. One other thing I wanted to talk about on this slide. So it's really important if you go through this process to also talk about the results you're getting and why you're getting them. So if I'm a female in my firm and I see that we only scored 3 on gender pay equity, I'd be like, hey, that stinks. What's that all about? So the reason is when you have to at some point draw a line in the sand of when you're going to submit all of your materials and all of your information. And the way gender pay equity is calculated is based on labor category. So at the time that we submitted, we had a labor category that had some entry-level people just entering that category who happened to be female. And we had some senior people in the same category who had been doing that same position, but on more complex projects for 8 years or more. So there was a pay difference in that labor category. So that's why we didn't score the 4. We are very careful to pay women and men the same salary for the same job, but we happen to have people in the labor category with different years of experience doing different things. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so the next one is employee health. So this one I call well-being a strength, but really we only scored a 2. But it was better than physical health. So this is another case where we think, I think as a firm, we feel like we're doing pretty well. We have lots of wellness programs. Every year we take an afternoon off where we pay people to go hiking together. This is one of our company events. During an afternoon, we rode bikes to different project sites in town. So in general, we talk about it a lot. We feel like we're supportive, but to reach the level 4 score for well-being, we have to document our company well-being program. And no one has done that yet. So that's an area where we can certainly improve in the future. And I think we'll get there. We just aren't there yet. For physical health, level 4 requires implementing either the CDC's workplace health model, going through the WELL Platinum certification, or doing a FitWell certification for our office. So they're starting, that didn't exist in 1.0, so they're starting to fold in other people's criteria also to make this easier. But that's why we're not scoring a 4 right now. So this slide, these pictures are getting kind of old. I'm pretty sure these babies are now in school. Actually, I know they are. But I keep using it because who doesn't like baby pictures, right? So this was cool because when I was there the first time, I was the first female architect to have a baby at Trivers, and this is in 2005. One of our HR team members had had a baby the year before, and she was, I think, the first. And that was like 35 years after the firm started. So to me, I love this picture because we had a baby boom, a big one. I think we only had 30 team members at the time, and we had 6 babies born within like 8 months. 5 of them were to female employees, and 1 was to a male. And all of them came back. They're still in the profession. And so that was it was just like a milestone, a big change from when I had my baby to our Trivers baby boom year. So one of our strengths on this slide is healthcare. If you cover 75% of healthcare costs, you're at a level 3. So that includes like family and stuff like that too. So paying 75% of the employee's costs. And then level 4 is if you cover fully 100% of healthcare costs. So we're not there yet, but we're happy that we're at the level 3. The family and medical leave, this one's tough, just trying to make the financial model work in the United States. Level 4 is 24 weeks of full paid leave, which would be an amazing thing to offer. But right now, without some government help, it doesn't really work. So we do have, we have short-term disability, and we do offer some paid leave for birth, whether it's father, mother, or adoptive. But anyway, that's where we are. We're at a number 1 right now. The next category is stewardship. So in this one of our strengths is volunteering. This is something we do at least a couple of times a year. So usually for our clients, we love going to Tower Grove Park and doing some planting. A lot of us live in the neighborhood and they're our client. We have a written policy on our volunteer time. And then we also offer some paid volunteer time with a community match, with a PTO match. So one of the challenge is local communities. So this is, it's sort of like, this is not a, like where the implementing a wellness plan seems like low-hanging fruit. This one seems like a big deal to me that I hope someone in our firm takes on, but it probably won't be me. Because you have to think about your organization, not think about, but you have to document how your organization benefits the community, and with measurable results. So maybe we won't get to level 4, but it's something we can work toward. There's obviously steps in between as well. And then the last one is purchasing and supply chain. So here we're scoring a 1 on both of them, mostly due to documentation. So we're a Mosaic ambassador company. I don't know if everyone here knows about Mosaic, but Mosaic is St. Louis's initiative to be welcoming to immigrants. So through our Mosaic ambassadorship, like all of our company lunches, we buy from immigrant-owned businesses, which makes lunch a lot more fun too. We try to buy locally, even consultants working with women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, that all goes into it. But you have to, in order to reach the equitable purchasing level 4, you have to be documenting your processes, measuring and reporting them. And 30% of all your purchases, so even like your office supplies, I think consultants are included too. So like all of your office expenses, 30% have to be local. So that's difficult, especially if you're doing national work and working with national partners. But we did notice when we were prepping for the AIA conference this summer that most firms seem to have two, I call it stars, but 2 points, whatever, on this scale. So I did look into this, getting the next one. And the next one is really just identifying significant actual and potential negative social impacts in the supply chain. So it's not really even about doing anything about it yet. It's about raising your level of awareness of the impact of the supply chain of the things that you're purchasing. So I thought that people who signed up for this presentation might be interested in this Design for Freedom. It's something I've learned about recently. So they are, I do have to read this because I don't want to screw it up. So give me a second here. They're working toward eliminating forced labor in building material supply chains. So it's a pretty new thing, but really important because a lot of the materials that we're buying and using in our buildings, if you go back in the supply chain, there's forced labor somewhere. So again, just raising your level of awareness, and that's a different presentation that I'm not qualified to give, but it's something I'm interested in looking into, and I thought you all might be too. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the problems and challenges. Challenges, not problems. And okay. This one was a word chart, so this isn't going to work with a raise of hands. I was going to ask what people thought the most common challenges to getting certification might be, but don't fear, I have some ready. Okay, so first is perception. So because it's an ILFI program, people think it's a sustainability initiative. And so they put like in our office, that would be like putting our green team on it. They are working on building materials, sustainability in terms of design, but this is a completely different set of information. So it's not a sustainability initiative. Confidentiality, conflicting with transparency. So in order to submit for the label, there is probably a lot of confidential information involved. So on our team, I work directly with our HR and accounting person to do the actual submission. So even though we have other people working on it, there's a certain point at which they have to stop and we have to finish. This is a big one, maintaining momentum. Someone really has to want to do this and someone has to stick through it because there's calculations, there's information gathering, and none of it is really that difficult, but projects get in the way, life gets in the way. So if there isn't someone who's driving this, or a group of someone's driving this, it's really difficult to manage the timeline stalls. Next is communication. So again, you might not get the results you were hoping for. You might think we're really great in this area and you're not, or maybe it's at a time like I explained with the gender pay equity that because of the timing, the results aren't what you want. So you have to make sure that there's communication happening along with the label. So talk to your team about why you scored the way you did, what you're working toward, what the priorities are, and the possibility that we might be worse next year when we renew than we were this year. So it's just an ongoing process. But again, it's a snapshot, it's a point in time when you renew the label. And then leadership support. So if you don't have leadership support, like this does take time. Most people probably don't want to do it, you know, on the weekend, and you need access to information that you can't get on the weekend. So there is a labor effort, although it's not that bad really. And then the information sharing part, like your leadership has to be open to at least sharing the information, sharing the results, and the conversations that are going to come from that. Okay, so the timeline, I did leave, when I presented at the AIA conference, I presented with a team member from Lake Plato. So we compared our timelines, and so I left both of them on here just to show you that it's kind of similar. So on the left is Trivers and on the right is Lake Plato. So I heard about it, I think first in 2017. I created an account, I watched a webinar, and then like 7 months later, somebody came back from the AIA conference and said, hey, Amy, I just heard about this thing. It's called the Just Label. Have you heard about it? So then I said, yeah, I got to do that. We want to do that. And then 3 months later, I watched the webinar again. So time just goes by. But that was actually better than Lake Plato's experience, which was they found out about it in 2013. Created the user account. So some of you might create a user account tonight. They drafted some policies, and then it was 6 years of occasional meetings about the policies that they were drafting. So I'm hoping that maybe this session can help short circuit some of that timing for anyone who's listening. But the implementation for both of us was really 5 months. So once you decide you're doing it, you have the buy-in, you have a team who's working on it, it's not that bad. So I had to create a new login because I had forgotten mine. And then 2 months later, pulled in HR and accounting help. Then we spent a couple months working on handbook edits. So you get into kind of a weird cycle where you're like, oh, if I had this, we'd score better. And so you start making improvements, and some of the things are things we already supported, but they weren't in our handbook. And the Just organization, or ILFI, they offer a lot of templates. So it's a great way, even if you don't go through with it, it's a great way to get templates for things that you can improve on in your handbook, and things that people care about. Like I never read the handbook 20 years ago. Not ever, except maybe to check what I was supposed to wear to work on my first day or something. And our team reads our handbook all the time now. So that's part of it too, is not assuming that people know what you care about if it's not written down. So gender pay equity, we were doing that. We were checking that. We were verifying that, but we hadn't written it down anywhere. So But at a certain point, you also have to stop and say, okay, we're going to submit everything. This is where we are now. We can keep improving, and we hope we'll improve by the time we renew. And it was the same thing for Lake Plato. It was about 5 months for them. So advice. So if you're not a leader in a firm, but you're someone working in a firm and you want to try to get this going, I have some advice. So first, think about your goals. So why is this important to you? Why would it be important at your firm? Get a group of friends or team members together who also care about it. It just helps with the accountability again, because months fly by and then you realize you haven't done anything. So use other people's work and lessons learned. So we've been through this twice now. So we can be a resource for anybody that is going through this. We don't want to continue to be the only firm in St. Louis that has this. It's kind of like the talking point, but it's been a few years now. So we'd rather have more people, more people doing it. And on that map, get a really big blob in St. Louis of just label organizations. But also, ILFI will help you, and there's a bunch of other firms. There's a database of firms. So whatever you're going through or trying to understand, somebody else probably already has. Give yourself a timeline, make a deadline. That is what actually did it the first time. We said November 1st, or maybe it was October 1st, because I think we got it in November. It's cut off. We're not going to make any more changes. We're submitting it as is. Get buy-in and engagement from whoever is working in your HR and accounting teams. You cannot do this without them. Thanks, Becky. She's on vacation. She's not listening, but okay. So then if you're trying to talk to leadership about why they should consider doing this, first, so these are things that might resonate even if the social equity or EDI part doesn't, which hopefully that already does. But if you need more, it's a retention benefit. So for us to be able to tell our team that, not that we're perfect or that we've got it all figured out, but hey, we know we need to work on this, and this is what we're doing. This is how we're trying, talk openly about ideas for improving. That matters. People, I think generally don't need you to have it all figured out, but they need to know that you care about it and that you're trying to do better. I think it has been a recruitment benefit for us. Certainly, we have a lot of people in there. I don't sit in on the interviews, but I've heard that this comes up in interviews now. People want to know what we're doing in terms of EDI. The just label is just one thing that Trivers is doing. We're doing many other things as well, but it matters to people. Again, probably because it's out there, people are talking about it, so people aren't afraid to ask about it, which is great. And so it's helped us in terms of talking to potential team members about joining our firm, because they know that we care about it. And then marketing. So sometimes I talk to this about this to clients. It is a differentiator at this point. Hopefully someday it won't be, but right now it still definitely is. You can also get a lead innovation point if any team member on a project, client, architect, consultant has a just label. It's an automatic innovation point. Okay, so advice for leadership. So if anyone here is in a leadership position at a firm, here's some other things to consider. So you're going to have difficult conversations. So just be open to that. It's better to have an open, difficult conversation than to have things doing and not talked about. Going through the process, you can acknowledge areas for improvement, but it also gives you an opportunity and a platform to talk about what you are doing really well. Sometimes I think that stuff gets lost too. So this process helps highlight where you are already successful as well. So I also sit on our EDI committee. So because I'm a principal, and because I'm in that committee, we have rotating team members. We have, like, it's just another opportunity for people to talk about maybe a perception or an understanding of why something is the way it is. And because I'm in the room, I get to quickly like fix it if it's not, if the perception is wrong, or if there's a misunderstanding about why something is the way it is. And if I wasn't sitting in the room, I wouldn't be able to do that. So we hope always that people are coming to us and asking questions, but some of that stuff just happens, and then and then you start thinking things. But in this format, because we have an EDI committee, it's just a natural place for some of those things to come up. And even the just label, like what I'm sharing today and what I've shared with our firm, it's still a high level overview, but our EDI committee, there's 4 or 5 more people who have been more deeply involved to understand it even better, and they can share that information or help explain things to the rest of the team as well. And then, like, back to the beginning of where we started, this helps us establish our priorities and a strategy. So the places where we have maybe only 1 point, but it'd be pretty easy to get to 2, or the places where we have 1 point, it's going to be really difficult to get to 2, but it's really important. That helps us establish a strategy and focus. So without focus, we would just be kind of like taking whatever's coming at us easily instead of developing a strategy. But it's clear, it clarifies what your goals are, it clarifies where you need to improve, and then it's on your mind as you're running the firm. That's it. I don't know how I did on time, but.
We do have a question in the chat. So it says, we had a small discussion today between a couple of people, but have you signed on to the 2030 challenge?
Yes. 2030 commitment?
Yes.
Yes. Is that a yes or no question?
For people online, you could either unmute and ask your questions, or you could keep your questions in the chat. And for people in the room, please speak up so people online can hear you.
Are there any costs associated with getting a just label?
Yeah. So for a small firm, I just saw that today, 1 to 24 people, it's $500. I think 25 to 50 or maybe 100 is $1,000. But you renew it every 2 years, which is good because it takes a few months to get all the things together. So we'll probably, I feel like in my mind, we just finished, but this fall already, I have it on our calendar to start gathering data again. But it's also exciting just to see, I like to know where we are. I hope it's better, but we'll see. It's better to know, and not, so that's the point of the renewal also. So you pay the fee each time you renew too, but it's certainly not out of reach or anything. And it grows. Huge companies, I can't remember what the number, I think it goes up to 25,000, but that's if you have tens of thousands of employees. Yeah, which I can't, that probably takes longer. This is for, I did compare, so Lake Plato has more than 40 people. Maybe she said they have like 60 or 70, I'm not positive. But for both of us in this range, it took about 5 months. Yeah.
So could you compare scores across other architects? You pulled out their just labels and looked at them sort of in comparison?
Not really. I did when I presented with Heather. We had it's a similar presentation, but we had both of our labels on there so we could each talk about different things. But talking with her, she was focused on some different things that I hadn't thought of, and she had some tools and resources that we hadn't used. So I definitely think it's beneficial to talk about it. And even like saying, she's the one who told me most firms had 2 boxes on that purchasing and supply chain one. So that made me feel like, well, if most firms are doing it, it must be something that's reachable. So that's why I looked closer into it, but not really Maybe if there's more in St. Louis, we will.
I'm not sure if you went over it earlier, but what about accountability? Is it from year to year where you have to submit your information that supports what you're doing so that you can get the score? And is there such thing as the label expiring, the just label expiring?
Yeah, so I go back to our label. Sorry. It's probably a much faster way to do this. Oops. Ah. Okay, it stopped. Sorry. Did I mess it up? Sorry. Let me see if I can go back to it. Well, yes, it expires. Hold on. Let me go to the presentation. But I'm not sharing yet, right?
Right.
Okay. Trying to show you, but now I can't find my Zoom. I lost it. I'm sorry. It's really hard to do IT stuff with people staring at you.
No, it's all good. All good.
Sorry. So no, it's okay. It does expire and it shows on the bottom of your label. So on the bottom of our label, it says TRIOO2. And our first one says 001. So I'm thinking it's the first 3 letters of your company name. And then it gives the expiration date of your label. So it's every 2 years, and you do have to resubmit everything each time you renew. And they ask for backup. There's a bunch of files that we submit.
Yeah. It's good.
That's good.
I gotta get. I wish I could just remember what slide number that was. Let's see. I'll try to bring it up here. It's like rewind. Yeah. Oh, there it is.
Expiration.
Yeah, so here at the bottom, there's our expiration, which I was actually so our last one, it expired, our first one was in November. So we had submitted by November 2023, but it took them longer this time, probably because there's more people submitting. It took them longer to give us the approval. So it's March.
How exactly, excuse me, how exactly does freedom of association equity category work?
Yeah. So we ended up adding a policy that said we are open to people, basically open to a workplace union. It's that. But at an architecture firm, even when we submitted, I can't remember if there was all the conversation about unions when we submitted last fall, or if that's been more recent. But it has to do with that. And so we added a policy that was basically that we're open to it, but not necessarily like we don't have one. It's not in our firm right now, I think. I do have all of the, when you go through it, there's a lot of writing. You get a manual, so it tells you at a high level, like to get 1, you need this, and 2 and 3 and 4. So if you want more detail, I could send you that section.
I was just curious.
Yeah,
You didn't really
that's
cover
what it
it,
is.
so.
Yeah, and so on the 1.0 label, you could opt out of something that didn't apply. So I think some of the ones where you see, I think we had opted out of hazardous chemicals in the first one. You could opt out of one section in 2 categories, but you can't do that anymore. So you can't opt out of anything. You have to answer everything. But it is, again, it's made not just for architecture firms, it's for any company, any organization. So that's why some of those things that seem strange or like they don't apply to us, they would apply to other companies.
Starbucks, Amazon.
Yeah. Manufacturing companies, yeah.
Question. Has the label sparked more conversations within the firm? So for example, people who weren't directly involved in applying for the label, asking why a particular indicator was scored that way or how performance can be taken a step further?
Yeah, I mean, we've proactively talked about it, so I wouldn't suggest getting a label behind the scenes and then sticking it on your website and not talking to your team about it. I mean, or even the leadership, you know, you have to, if you're gonna do it, hopefully it's for the purpose of being transparent and for having better communications around measurable outcomes. So to me, one of the main points of doing it is to have better communication with our team about where we are and what we're doing. So did I answer that, or was there more to it? I don't know about, maybe Frank, I don't know if you know if other people are talking about it, not in our formal situations, but.
Well, it's sort of like comes and goes. If there's a presentation made to the firm-wide, that engenders a lot of conversation, not just that day, but for a week after. And then I guess then it sort of subsides and doesn't come to the fore again until we're on having mid-year conversations or end-of-year conversations, when once again it's just on everyone's mind. That's what I would say.
Mid-year and year-end reviews.
Mid-year and year-end reviews, where we're thinking of our place within the firm, and we're thinking of the firm and how it supports or whatever us. Then I think some of the categories and the like find their way into just chat discussions.
Yeah. So the other part of this presentation that I didn't give is we do have an EDI handbook. So we folded the JUST label together with the AIA Guides for Equitable Practice. And we do have a template if anybody wants that, that we shared for another, I think the Women in Design and Construction Conference. So our EDI group uses the EDI handbook to identify opportunities. So every 6 months we rotate in a new team member and they serve for 18 months. And so we decide on a 6-month charge based on who's in the room and who's on the committee at that time, so that we're accomplishing things as we go. So the JUST label, our opportunities and our scores is folded into that handbook. And so the handbook is really our tool. So in terms of sparking conversations or identifying priorities, it certainly does, and it plays into that quite a bit. It's nice to have, because even the AIA Guides for Equitable Practice, there's not, it's not a measurable tool. Like I like this because it's measuring outcomes. And so there's a lot of other work that goes into employee engagement or that goes into getting the score. But this is kind of the measurement.
In the diversity section, is there anything about age, or is there anything that's asked that a normal HR person wouldn't have that you haven't given employees participating?
Yeah, so actually some of the questions in the label have informed our onboarding process, because when you're filling out a survey or filling out a questionnaire about the label, it's kind of a strange time to go back to people you've known and ask questions about who they are. And so I think it's more appropriate in onboarding. But that's hard too, because, you know, I guess there's always the opt-out option. But yeah, sometimes we don't know the answers and we have had to go and ask people information about their background in order to fill out the forms. But again, hopefully, like that's a lesson learned too, that these are things that are important for us to know. And so we can ask earlier and in a more, in an easier.
And even when you ask it, presenting it as And it's important to our application for the just label. You can say, we're only asking this. We still have to have, but we're asking it because we're using the data.
Yeah.
Have you had many people who choose to opt out or don't want anything to do with the program?
No. Not yet.
Okay, good.
Is there a way that you can have like anonymous reporting of like personal information, say like gender identity, sexuality, disabilities? Something like that?
Yeah, so, well, all of that is through HR.
Okay.
So that's not, we don't share all of the background data that went into getting the score. So that's what I was talking about to Marcus's question, asking that sort of thing in onboarding and discussing the reasoning for it would be more appropriate. And I suppose if someone didn't want to answer, then that just wouldn't factor into the calculation. So that would be fine too. I mean, yeah, it's again, just a tool. So we're not going to make anyone give us information they don't want to, but yeah, no one except for HR and I'm myself, and then our HR person are the only ones who see the final data.
What do you have to do to get a 4 in training and education?
Oh my gosh, you have all the detailed questions. Training and education. So we do this one, we have a professional development budget. It's in our handbook. Each, depending on your employee, like depending on your role in the firm, you have a dollar amount and you have to spend 24 hours of professional development time a year on us. That's on our time. And so we ask people to submit anything that they're interested in. So it could be a leadership conference, it could be Mass Timber in Seattle. And then if it's over the budget or the time, then people just have to use their personal funds for that. But we based it on, and some of these things came from, like if you, I don't know, when I was younger and I wanted to go to the AIA conference and then I heard like these 3 people are going, but nobody asked me. And so it takes that like, why not me kind of thing out of it. It's a way for people to advocate for themselves. And so the budgets are based on, once you have your license, you should be able to afford to go to the AIA conference every other year because you can carry forward funds too. So I feel like we have a pretty good professional development program, but we're only at a 2. So I'll look it up and I'll let you know. I remember, if you ask me in 6 months, I'll know all of this stuff.
And another question, has Trivers used the JEST label in relation to other certifications and frameworks it ties into? So LEED, WELL, Living Building Challenge.
So we don't have any projects that are going for WELL certification, but I believe we're using an innovation point on one of our federal projects that's getting LEED. Because we're actually 2 of our federal projects. Right now, one, we're the lead architect, one, we're a consultant, but because we're on the team, the scorecard gets an innovation point, but not the others yet.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sharing it's still up there, but oh, that's because of this. Right? Should I unplug?
Appreciate your time, I think, so much.